let's do roll call. Thank you, everybody. That was kind of exciting.
Ms. Friedman,
I'm here.
Mr. Arnold,
Here.
Ms. Banks. Here. Ms. Bell, Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Carter, Mr. Janai,
I'm here.
Reverend Gordon,
Present.
Ms. Harding,
Here.
Ms. Howe, Ms. Mendoza-Lot,
Here.
Mr. Knowles, Mr. O'Connor,
Here.
Ms. Rodriguez. Here. Dr. Russell, Mr. Stengel,
Here.
Mr. Tiggs, and Major White. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have recognition of visitors. You're gonna kick us
Lewis,
off.
Recovery Council
Thank you, Paul.
and St. Paul Community Center Board of Trustees.
Robert Kasperzak, board staff. Steve Stanley, board staff.
Carl Christopher, board staff.
Thank you, thank you. Is there anything that should be removed from the consent agenda?
Yes, please, I and K.
I and K. Thank you. Any others? Okay, can we move to accept everything except I and K?
Yeah, name which ones though. I is the FY 2023 proposed additional agency allocations, and K is legal fees. Those will be removed from the consent agenda, everything else will remain. Yeah, go ahead now.
Do I have a motion?
In second.
All right,
We're ready.
we're on a roll here. All right, are there, any well, we pretty much went through the anybody abstaining, so, go ahead.
Mr. Stengel,
Yes.
Dr. Russell,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez. Yes. Mr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza-Lot,
Yes.
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Ms. Harding,
Yes.
Reverend Gordon,
Yes.
Mr. Janai,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Banks,
Yes.
and Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we wanna go to I and,
Yeah, it'd be Jenny present.
okay. Jenny, would you present I for
I'm
me?
gonna flip to page 21, the fiscal year 23 proposed additional agency allocations. As we discussed at the Planning and Oversight Committee, we have heard from our agencies and other stakeholders in the community that they're really struggling because of rising costs and the ability to retain staff and get new staff. And we are anticipating some underspending for our fiscal year 22 grants. And we are proposing an additional allocation to our agencies. They are listed on page 22 to be used in fiscal year 23 in hopes that they can help alleviate some of the concerns with the additional costs and staffing issues. And there is a motion on the bottom of page 21. So moved.
I'll second. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, great.
Mr. Arnold,
Abstain?
Ms. Banks. Yes. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Janai,
Yes.
Reverend Gordon,
Yes.
Ms. Harding,
Yes.
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza-Lot,
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor,
Abstain.
Ms. Rodriguez. Yes. Dr. Russell,
Yes.
Mr. Stengel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please stop.
Okay, I'll draw your attention to the bottom of page 23, legal fees as a result of Rescue Mental Health and Addiction Services filing a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Northwest District of Ohio, Western Division. We've made a request for a legal fee allocation, and you have that recommended motion. for Frank Hickman and Associates for an amount not to exceed $50,000. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, I missed the planning meeting, but I thought, since it was in federal court, that I thought the county would.
The question is why are we paying external legal fees for something that is covered by county? The county is well-versed in one portion of the case and want to rely on the legal expertise of our existing representatives for the other portions.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Morgan?
Mr. Arnold?
Abstain?
Ms. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Janai?
Yes.
Reverend Gordon?
Yes.
Ms. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza Locke?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Dr. Russell?
Yes.
And Mr. Stengel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Amy?
Hi, everyone. I'm on page 24, the Ohio Mass Indigent Patient Funds. As you may recall, due to the COVID pandemic, there had been a decreased capacity and access to regional psychiatric hospitals throughout the state. The hospital that's in our catchment area is the Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital. From July 1st through December 31st of '21, Ohio Mass allocated funds to local boards to cover the costs of inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations for individuals who are considered indigent at local private hospitals to ensure that they had access to a bed. Ohio Mass then allowed the boards to request additional funds for January through June 30th, 2021. Since that time, we've only had one reimbursement request, which was actually from Promenica Flower Hospital. But at this time, we're requesting a retroactive allocation approval from Ohio Mass in the amount of $44,800, and then to execute agreements with Promenica Flower and Mercy St. Charles, because they do still have the remaining 9 days or so to submit any reimbursement requests for any patients that meet that criteria. So there is a motion on page 24, and I'm happy to answer the questions.
Amy, is the Mercy St. Charles, did they just not have any patients?
Well, I think part of it's not that they don't have any patients, it's that those patients already have a funding source.
Okay.
But they also have had some internal changes with their billing department, and so, I think that they're still trying to figure out some things on that end.
Just out of curiosity, what's the deadline for submission?
Well, the hospitalization dates can only be between January and June 30th, and I think they have up to 10 days to submit something afterwards.
Oh, okay.
And where the money just stays in the pot if nobody,
Mhm.
okay, files for reimbursement?
Well, there's a request for a carryover, and if it's not approved, we send the money back.
Oh, I see.
But almost all carryovers, if not all, have been approved.
Linda?
Is there any chance or miracle that the state will add more beds to NOPH?
In an unrelated matter to this, I would not speculate on the thinking of the state. They've given no indication that they are increasing any state beds at this time.
The other two are great if people want to go. But the problem is, they go and they're there like 5 days and, you're okay, you're stable, and they're really not. And then I get to see them, so this is my last meeting I'm going. Okay?
Give it
You
to
know,
us,
we
Linda.
have, I got a call from a woman in another county, which is kind of under our umbrella. She's just at her wit's end, they're desperate. And there's 18, according to her, NRPH told me there's 18 currently pink slip waiting to get in, and her son is number 9.
Oh, wow.
Now, this young man has a master's degree in nursing. He was married during COVID. He was working in ICUs in a hospital. He's had a total relapse, not taking meds. He's violent. He's been at CCNO for almost a month. He's deteriorated. It's, you know, I mean, I don't, she asked me if I could help. What, I can't do anything. Just so,
That is an all too familiar.
I know it is.
Situation. It is, concerning that a minimal level of behavioral health services are provided at CCNO to the extent that might
Poor.
alleviate some of that. And, you know, we've recognized this not only, with our support of Court Diagnostic and Treatment Center, which,
Another.
still needs some work, and I think we'll be hearing a little bit more from them so that they can improve their processes, so to reduce the number of folks that are awaiting placement for competency restoration is a clog. We have Senate Bill 2, which really isn't doing much, right? One thing we do see is that the private hospitals can and do take people who are on a pink slip.
But
However, there is a group, and we know the group, most of us providers know the group, where they have trouble accessing any service. That group is more acute, has a tendency to be more violent. It's the group that Amy ends up having to provide care coordination for and create special circumstances for them. We know that one of the best things we can do is continue to A, advocate just like you did, B, create solutions that we can control, a la the adult psychiatric rehabilitation facility, because we know the back end controls the front end. So if we can get a flow going, support Court Diagnostic in some of their efforts so that they can do restoration competencies quicker, competency evaluations quicker, so that they don't clog up on beds unnecessarily. And continue to fund things like you did last time, startup ACT teams.
that's good. I have one more thing and then I'll.
Of course.
Of course, you knew I had one more thing.
You brought cake today, so.
I brought
do
cake
whatever
so
you
I
want.
could talk.
Right.
Everybody please eat cake. You know, I'm sure I'm gonna end up in a nursing home someday, even though my son has promised me the budget in nursing home executive suite. Now, I don't think he's found it. But a lot of these people who are mentally ill, like we have one from a nursing home, she attacked a nurse. And so she's been in jail for too long. There aren't any nursing homes now, that nursing home will no longer take her, and the other nursing homes won't take her. But then I got to thinking, all these people are going to nursing homes because there's no long-term hospital. So when I go to a nursing home, I guess I better take my protection along, because hopefully they're taking their meds in the nursing home. But that's what they're using nursing homes for. Amen, I'm done. Thank you. Can I move, did you already move for that?
I just have a quick question. What's CCL?
Correction Center of Northwest Ohio, CCNO.
CCNO, okay. I just wanted to make sure I mean, I knew it was correction something, and I didn't be able to intelligently answer the question, so I'm glad it answered.
We don't fund them for any behavioral health
We do
stuff,
not.
do we? Okay.
I'll second Linda's motion.
First, we have a second. Any questions? I think so.
Wasn't Linda's in the comments? Did we do a first and a second for that already?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we have, just now we did.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. They didn't have.
Go
You still
for it,
brought cake, so
Rogan.
you can do whatever you want.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Ms. Banks. Yes. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Carter, Mr. Janai,
Yes.
Reverend Gordon,
Yes.
Ms. Harding,
Abstain?
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza-Locke,
Yes.
Mr. Knowles,
Abstain.
Mr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Dr. Russell?
Yes.
And Mr. Stengel?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Steve. Steve, where, oh, there you are.
Over here. Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, I did not bring cake. We're going to do what we can. On page 25 of your packet is a proposed motion to increase the fiscal year 2023 miscellaneous professional services administrative budget line by $55,000 for the purchase of consulting services to begin the first phase of the board's infrastructure transformation process. A little background might be helpful at this point. The ITP concept was conceived as an outgrowth of the board's 2020 interim strategic planning effort, which addressed 4 key strategic pillars: structural racism and equity, pandemic recovery, systems and processes, and services. The ITP specifically addresses pillars 2 and 3, pandemic recovery and system processes. Both of these necessitated, as we look at things, that Mhrsb capitalize upon digital technologies to better serve and engage with our community. The ITP is also an outgrowth of the process whereby we will migrate from our current legacy hardware and software infrastructure systems to an entirely cloud-based and distributed operating environment configuration. A little bit of quick history, and then I will move along. At the March 1st special board meeting, you were briefed, some of whoever was here was briefed on the overall ITP concept and the proposed way forward regarding the creation of a request for proposal for the project. On April 25th, we released the ITP RFP, which solicited organizations that could help evaluate the board's existing infrastructure, business processes, and all of the underpinning technologies that support that. The RFP's overall deliverable for the selected consultant was to be a set of actionable recommendations for our internal cloud-based infrastructure transformation implementation. On June 8th, the board's ITP RFP, say that 10 times fast,
Yeah, I know.
review committee consisting of board members, Ms. Bell and Mr. Janai, and board staff evaluated the received ITP proposals, examining them for their content, format, methodology, relevant operational experience and pricing, as well as minority business enterprise status. After this review, the top proposal scored by the ITP RFP review committee was from Ascend Innovations. Ascend is an organization headquartered in Dayton, Ohio, that has worked with a number of board areas, most recently with Montgomery County, and has developed technology and technology enhancements. They work in our field, and interestingly enough, Montgomery County currently supports this board by doing billing and claims processing for us. So that's a partnership that has worked very well. Ascend was formed as a collaboration, interestingly enough, between the Dayton Area Hospital Association and Dayton's 3 major hospital networks. So they also have a fairly good handle on the infrastructure requirements for the healthcare environment. If selected, work will begin within 30 days of the contract award with an agreed upon timeline to follow. At the bottom of page 25, there is a motion to that effect. And pending any questions, I talked a lot and I didn't give anybody a chance, so I apologize. Are there any questions?
Second.
Okay, we're buzzing.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing, again, am I to understand that the full allocation is 2.1 million? And that's increasing that by, with an increase of 55,000, but it says for consulting services. I heard during your presentation, you talked a little bit about software. Is this agreement for software?
No. This is, we know, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
We know where we want to go. And the simplest example, we want to go from the legacy technology, our desktop computers, stand monitors, servers in the other room. We know we want to go to the cloud. We want to have a distributed computing environment functionally. What the consultants are going to come in here and do, we have a vision. If you're thinking about building a house, we know we wanna build a 4-bedroom house that's 2 stories with a basement. What we don't know exactly is what kind of windows we want. Do we want an asphalt driveway, a concrete driveway, those kind of things. So it's more the specificity of the infrastructure. We know where we wanna go. We have a very good idea of where we wanna go. They're going to help us refine down how we're gonna get there.
The architects.
Yeah, they're the actual architecture. And Mr. Janai has been heavily involved in the project.
So is this for a 1-year period?
It's actually to completion. It should not take nearly that long. This is only the first phase of the infrastructure transformation. This is a discovery phase. The contractor will come in and work with us and look at our internal processes, how we're doing stuff. You got computers on the desk, you have this, that, and the other thing, how we do business. The second, so it would basically be a discovery. Phase 2 is an implementation phase, where we actually buy the software, buy the hardware, could do the conversions that are required, migrate data to the cloud, make certain that all the legal ramifications have been tied together, covering HIPAA and all the other pieces, and then actually roll out an implementation plan, train the staff on what that will mean. The third phase will be a discovery for the system as a whole. And I believe I was not here, unfortunately I was on active duty, but I know it was discussed in broad brush, but it will be functionally the same concept. Across the entire system of care, we're going to look at how the system of care is doing business and how they could migrate as well and what synergies can be derived from that. This is something industries around the world are doing anyway, from logistics, freight, to healthcare. This is kind of, you even see sadly enough commercials for this nowadays on TV. And the final is the implementation system-wide. So the entire process, it's a really long answer, I'm sorry. For the first phase, it's 3 to 6 months tops. We should be actually less than that, to be perfectly honest. By phase 1 and 2, phase 2 should be done within 6 months, realistically, 9 months at the outside.
And if your question is, will additional allocations be required? The answer is yes, for each phase.
Looks likely for this phase that we're gonna be asked for more.
0.
No,
Okay.
it's a set fee contract.
Right, it's an RFP.
Yep.
Unless we add more work,
Yes.
which then may require additional dollars, but we'll,
This is a fixed fee contract.
And when I hear the term fixed fee, I mean, would there be any reimbursement requirements for travel or things of that sort?
Yeah.
It's baked into
Yeah,
it's
it's-
$55,000.
It's built into it,
Yes,
so
sir.
it's not to exceed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? We've had a first and we've had a second. Let's do roll call.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Ms. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Janai?
Yes.
Reverend Gordon?
Yes.
Ms. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza-Lot?
Yes.
Mr. Knowles?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Dr. Russell?
Yes.
And Mr. Staple?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie, once again. Okay, next we have Scott.
did I really say, no, there's no chance that I'm gonna come back and ask for money for that phase 1? That is so unlike me. Damn. Steve,
Yes,
that's, you're locked in now.
You're held to it, Steve.
Yeah.
I got it. No problem.
Okay, everybody. Let's talk about a resolution for House Bill 523. It first appears on page 26, and just kind of a summary. December 22nd, 21, House Bill 523 was introduced in the House of Representatives by Representative DJ Swearingen. He primarily represents the communities east of us, centering around Erie and Ottawa counties in particular. It was referred to the House Behavioral Health and Recovery Supports Committee on the 25th, had its first hearing on the 17th, and that was basically Representative Swearingen just telling the group what the bill was about. At that time, it was a very finite bill around membership of boards. At the same time, our state association had been working in a small group to look at the Ohio Revised Code 340, our authorizing legislation. And we had actually got to a point where we had a different representative have language created for our bill. After some negotiation, we were able to merge essentially all of that language into the bill that had already been presented by DJ Swearingen. That bill received the amended bill, which is House substitute House Bill 523, received its second hearing on in front of the subcommittee or the committee on May 19th. At that time, myself and Commissioner Gerken provided testimony to that committee down in Columbus in support of the legislation. There isn't a resolution in support of the legislation, but before we bring that up, I want to go through some of the particulars of the bill. Now let's be clear, folks. Just like any other suggested legislation, there's things that we like, there's things that we love, and then there's things that we could do without. Oftentimes you negotiate, you take the good with the bad. And this bill is really no different. So there's going to be some things in here you don't necessarily may not support, but there are some broader concepts that I think we should remain open to. First and foremost, what Representative Swearingen's initial bill was, it was all about the composition of the board for the area Ottawa board. It was particularly targeting them, and if you recall, the Erie Ottawa board split as of January 1st. Ottawa went with Sandusky, Seneca, Wyandotte. Erie stood alone. There was putting it lightly, a mess. And what they realized is there was a lack of guidance in the revised code for when a board splits and what you do with the tax revenues and all of that stuff. So a lot of that gets cleaned up in this bill. There was also a desire to have more local control, which also gets plugged into this bill. Not only in the local control, mainly around having the county commissioners have a bigger say in how these boards run. Not just, or not only establishing its size, but also realigning the number of their appointments and the removal process. The language that appears in this summary has been approved by our state association. So everything in here, although we recognize that there might be some things that we might be a little squishy about, our state association said, for the greater good, we support this bill. Now, that said, there are a whole lot of conversations to be had before this ever becomes a law. As you are aware, the House and the Senate have, they went home for the summer, essentially. So they will not reconvene until November. Unless there's a major emergency, but I think we should reconvene. So when they reconvene in November, that is typically what is called lame duck, right? Because you'll have new members that have just been elected, some will be on their way out. So the first potential next hearing for this bill in the House is going to be during lame duck, and that'll likely be opponent testimony. We've already had proponent testimony. And then there'll be a general, and if it comes out of committee, that will repeat itself in the main committee and then in the House. And then if there is a corresponding bill that gets introduced in the Senate, that'll be assigned to the Senate committee, and then that'll have some hearings. Now, a lot of times, these things run together, and that's what we hope we'll do. We are hopeful that we have identified a senator that is willing to introduce the legislation that mirrors. So the change in board size is something that the commissioners consider. There is a requirement that they meet with us and discuss that. There is not a discussion about if we approve or not, and they can't do it. It's their decision. Size, in particular, but they can only do that once every 4 years. And if we want to remain the same, just like when the boards merged, the Alcohol and Drug and Mental Health Board merged, or when you had the ability to go from 18 to 14, if you wanted to stay at 18, which we are, you didn't have to do anything. So if we do nothing, we stay at 18, and all's good. I already mentioned the appointments are 2/3 commissioners, 1/3 Ohio Mass. The way the appointment process works now is the commissioners are gracious enough to allow us the opportunity to provide feedback to who they would be considering. They always consult with us. The state in their appointments rely mainly on us to recruit and then present applications for them to consider appointments, and I know that they do initial interviews with any candidates. I'm sure some of you might have gotten called recently. And then the big change in that appointment is no matter what number you pick, at least half of the board has to be comprised of persons who are either receiving services or have received services, or persons who have or parents of those individuals, so half the board. Currently, it's 2, and then there's 2 for clinicians. Now, it doesn't exclude our appointment of clinicians. It just requires half the folks be receiving services or family members of people who are receiving services. The next bullet is for newly established boards. They have a sequencing, and that was one of the things that they found, that when they split the boards. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, go ahead.
Before you go on, receive mental health services, is it from our agencies, or can it be from a private psychiatrist,
Anywhere.
Anywhere. Okay.
Right.
And past versus currently,
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. Okay, just making
So
sure.
if you saw a psychologist 10 years ago in a private setting, that would count?
That would count, yes. Okay. That may not be what we want to recommend, but it would count in other areas. And honestly, I've taken great pride in the fact that I know a lot of us have had loved ones or ourselves that have received services not only within our system, but the system of care. So I always am quick to point that out when people are talking about the board. We are very transparent in the fact that we have a good portion of our board, the majority of our board, that already meet this requirement.
Yeah.
So then there was just some odd things, like removes the prohibition of a family member of a commissioner from being an employee of the board, and that is just one of those things that are out there, that who knows why it made it in there. There was some reason why it made it in there. It had nothing to do with us. Do we like it? Not really. Can we live with it because we're going to gain some things on the other side? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can live with this. Board members can be removed by the appointing authority at will. That's a little bit of a change. They can kind of do that now. There is a due process, and this has a little bit of a due process as well, but the board, the state and county can do that pretty much
It's
now
the next
anyway.
section I'm interested
Right.
in.
Right. It's why I didn't put it's why I didn't put it in first. Building the momentum. A great deal around contract language. removes the 120-day notice requirement in full. Gone. Requires contracts to be, to include a process for early termination of the contract for any reason that the board determines termination is necessary, and provides a process for the provider to appeal the early termination. But that appeal process is not defined in the state code. It is our appeal process that we would negotiate locally via contract. Adds language stating that the board can use any process it chooses for entering in contracts, including an RFP. Of course, we already have the legal right to use the RFP. This just clarifies things a little bit more. Requires boards to implement working agreements with other government programs that provide public benefits for the purpose of coordinating public benefits and improving administration and management of the government program. Of course, that's another one of those, who doesn't agree with that, right? There are efficiencies. We do a lot of that now, but that is one of those things in there that, not quite sure why it's in there, but it was something that the sponsor wanted in there. We just heard a conversation about IT infrastructure, and of course, you know the long-term goal is data, data-driven decisions, metrics around data, value-based purchasing, letting data inform us. We've always been hamstrung with the inability to get all the data that we think is of value and necessary to do our work. This bill creates language that allows and requires people, organizations, state departments that hold that data, requires them to create processes to share that data with us. And we're not talking about aggregate data, we're talking about individual data. Requires Ohio Moss and Department of Medicaid to establish requirements, procedures for the provision of Medicaid recipients' data back to the boards. Requires boards to implement working agreements, again, with government programs that provide public benefits for the purpose of coordinating public health benefits. And then another thing that has, that you've been well aware of, because we've been dealing with it for a while, is the number of providers and investigations that occur from time to time. We have a number of new providers that come in, many of which we don't know who they even are. They just end up in Lucas County. We have no idea why they're here or what services they're providing. This language gives us more say and input into what is going on. The next bullet is something about can be removed for cause. I can be removed for cause now, the executive director, and contingent upon any contract. That's always been the case anyway, and there's a due process in there. So it removes the county opioid hub reporting requirement, which is the single biggest waste of administrative time that we may have and that the agencies may have, because the data that they're collecting and reporting is meaningless. And we have been telling the state to get rid of this data because it takes the agencies an enormous amount of time to comply. And the data is useless. We've figured out a way to kind of use it, but it takes Phil an awful lot of time to get to that level. The system itself is fraught with non-compliance at all levels of providers, and it is just an entire waste of energy. Waiting list reporting repeals the wait list section in its entirety as well. There's language in there that basically says if a provider hits 90% of its capacity, they're supposed to tell the board of a waiting list. Well, that may have been beneficial when we were the provider or the payer of record for both Medicaid and non-Medicaid. We're not that anymore. And virtually every provider has a waiting list in some sorts, as Amy knows, because she's just been taking some phone calls around that. And as you know, our providers are not shy in telling us what their needs are. And of course, previous to this presentation, you took some actions to attempt to address some of those needs. The last item on that page, withdrawal from joint county boards, doesn't impact us at all. And it was one of those nuancing things that they found that there was no process. There was a process for how you build a board, but there was no process for how to withdraw a board from an existing board structure. So they added that in. Just to give you an idea of how many boards are joint boards, there are 88 counties in Lucas or in Ohio, and there are only 50 boards. All the majority of the major metropolitan areas are their own, and then there's, honestly, I don't know the full number, but you know, we have boards that handle up to 6 counties. There are several that handle 5, a couple that handle 4. Most are 2 and 3. So that impacts those folks. But before Erie Ottawa split, no one could recall when a board withdrew from itself. We've had some standalone boards merge. Delaware Morrow, I think, was the most recent some time ago, but none have split. And then corresponding proposes changes to the Ohio Mass statute to allow for the to eliminate their ability to establish rules applicable to board around waiting list requirements. So it's that flip side of that. Proposes change in Medicaid statutes regarding access to data, so it actually goes into the Department of Medicaid authorizing legislation and says you will share data with the boards. And then the proposed changes to the tax levy statute are, it only impacts the Erie and Ottawa boards because it gives them language for how to split their joint levy. And that language did not exist beforehand. So with that, there is a draft resolution on the back, on page 29, and a motion on the middle of page 26 for your consideration, and I will stop there and answer any questions you may have.
Which one of those items do you think is gonna cause the most problems for Lucas County?
Oh, I think our problems are already here. But I can tell you that, I'll make the quote. In our deposition hearing or in our injunction hearing, there was a quote from the plaintiff's attorneys, basically saying that if we don't like the law, change it. Here we are.
In the contrary section, the 4th bullet makes amendments to the section, and after is that actually in, sorry, this is 27, contracting section, 4th bullet. Is that actually in there, or were you saying that for just to allow us that it only applies after the date of legislation?
Yeah, this doesn't go retroactive, so this doesn't resolve our current legals.
Yeah. But is that actually in there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, all of this is in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jill, is this?
Or because we had talked about that before, so I was curious if you were just reminding us of that, so we were like, oh, does this mean we're gonna get out of the?
No, it does not.
No.
So does this mean that we support all facets, we're saying we support all facets of the boards, the ones we're not too interested in?
Yes, it's an all or nothing.
You can't pick and choose.
Nope.
Do you have any other questions?
So, just so you know, if you wanted to pick and choose, you're better off not doing anything.
Is there anything in here that's seriously problematic for how we operate?
No. I had quite a bit to do with this conversation. So,
Are you pretty serious?
But due to the lame duck and the makeup, do you think there's any chance of this even getting passed?
yes, I do, because there's interest on the Senate side. It will be it'll be Representative Swearingen-'s to carry. But resolutions like this, and I will, if we pass it, I will be requesting the county commissioners to also pass a similar resolution. We're doing this in all 50 counties, or all 50 boards. We're asking all the commissioners. We're asking virtually anyone who's interested in supporting this to do the resolution, because that helps move this conversation.
Are there any other local entities that could provide letters of support, resolutions of support?
There are, but I wouldn't want to name them in a public meeting without talking to them first.
Okay.
Except the county commissioners, because Commissioner Gerken already.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying,
That's fine.
that, so once we do this, then we can reach out to all
Right.
these other organizations and ask them to join us.
You know, there's no piece of legislation that we're gonna be really happy with every piece of it,
No.
but there's a lot of this that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And, I would move that we support it.
I'll second.
I think we
But I do
gotta,
have another
can we say the whole board said second?
Yeah.
I did just have another question, or just.
Oh, sure.
For clarity, so on page 27, the one bullet, board input on provider certification and investigations. So if I'm reading this correctly, because I know there's always these, like, all these, agencies just pop up, so we'll be able to help that, because we'll have to go through OMAS, right, to get their certification, different things, so then if I'm reading that correct, then they're gonna bring that to your attention, like, hey, Susie Q over here is trying to open this behavioral health agency, what do you think?
Yes, and in fact, right now, we only hear of agencies once they're certified. So if somebody new comes in and nobody knows about them, they become certified, then we become aware. If there is an investigation that occurs, sometimes we're aware of it because we're the ones that are bringing it to the attention of Ohio Mass. But this will require them to bring any investigation to us for input on as well. No one knows the system as well as our team and then the other local providers, as you know, being one of the providers, right? And so, the things I think about when an agency comes here and establishes, a footprint is, what brought you to Lucas County? Why are you here? Where is your business plan? We have at least 40 alcohol and drug providers in Lucas County right now. What made you think that starting another one right down the street from where you're already at makes any sense at all? All that does is splits the workforce. Now, I'm all for competition and I'm all for someone's, ability to, sufficiency and do what they wanna do, live their dream. I'm all for that. But there has to be some business sense to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there isn't. It's just, I wanna do this, so I'm doing it.
It's not a duplication of services.
Right. And they're not doing the services that we truly need.
Correct.
All right, you come in here and you say, hey, I wanna do an ACT team and I wanna take those who are on that list of folks that we all know people don't wanna serve, well, now we got a conversation to have, right? Cause that's something we need.
Right.
People ain't doing that.
Is there a list of certified agencies?
Ohio Mass should have it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
It's on their website.
Is it on ours?
No, theirs.
Ohio,
No, theirs,
Ohio's.
yeah. And there's a new reporting system called LACS, LACTS. It's the way the agencies report all their information. And we get notices from that when a new license has been renewed or issued.
I swear there's one opening up in our street corner lately.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Indeed there is.
Are there any language in the proposed legislation that says what standards we're looking at when we're providing this input? In other words, you're talking about business sense. Is it broad enough to include that, or is it just on, are they properly certified, are they certifiable, that kind of thing?
So Ohio Moss will tell you that they come in and they look at the standards that are.
For
written.
certification.
For certification standards, right. And if you meet those standards, mostly, then that is the minimum required for certification. So I term it as aspiring to the minimum. And that has been made possible because Ohio Medicaid has a any willing provider rule that requires a contract for anyone who is able and willing to provide those treatment services. Well, when managed care comes in and they get full control, it's not gonna be any willing provider. They're not gonna want a contract with 40 to 60 different entities. They want a contract with 10, if that. So, that's what Ohio Moss looks at. We have the ability to look at whatever we want. If you notice, they're not giving us an avenue to stop. They're giving us an opportunity to provide feedback, and I think that's what we want. And sometimes we might go, if they're providing a service out in a community and geographic dispersion is something that we wanted, and even if it's a service that we don't really covet, but it's still a service in a community that needs it, okay. That conversation might be entirely different if they set up here down on Michigan Street where I have, where we have, 13 different organizations in a quarter-mile footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, let's do roll call.
Mr. Arnold?
Yes.
Ms. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Janai?
Yes.
Reverend Gordon?
Yes.
Ms. Harding?
Yes.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza Lot?
Yes.
Mr. Knowles?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Dr. Russell?
Yes.
And Mr. Stengel?
Yes.
Okay, next we have director's report, Scott.
So I've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
I am gonna take a second here and ask Mr. Michael Carter, who's sitting in the back and didn't know this was coming, to just give us a little update on mentallyWell.com, the awareness and the recognition ceremony, and mental health first aid and ALICE training.
Rob, you want to talk about Bill? Sure. Two of the trainings that we offer through the board is mental health first aid and our ALICE. Just mental health first aid, we had a couple of new instructors who were trained last week, and we plan to ramp up our mental health first aid trainings. We've gotten a lot of requests lately for it, and it's a really good overall training. It's a one-day training. It can be virtual, it can be a blended or an in-person. We prefer the in-person, by the way. Talking to a computer screen for 6 to 8 hours is a little much. But it's very good for all aspects of the community. So we try to focus on specific groups, specifically the faith-based communities. So we had a training actually last Saturday with First Alliance Church, and then we're gonna do a follow-up training with them in the coming weeks. The other training that we offer is ALICE, the active shooter training. Actually, I'm certified in it, and I do it in collaboration with the Sheriff's Office, and we are increasing we're starting to see an increase in requests for those trainings. Both trainings are very good. I really like them, and I think the best way to promote them is through word of mouth. So if you know of anybody or any organization that you belong to that would like a free training, please direct them to me.
I'll give you a card.
Okay?
Thanks, Robert. He does a really good job for our team with training. I'm trying to remember everything that Scott wants me to talk about.
Mentallywell.com.
Mentallywell.com. So lcmentallywell.com is sort of a landing page that we now have available to us because our website is a little bit long, LCMH, right, you go to .oh.gov. It's a little bit harder when you're doing advertising to get that out into the community. So we now have lcmentalllywell.com. And so part of that marketing campaign that we now have out and active, you're going to see a lot of billboards, you're gonna hear radio ads, they're out there now. You're gonna see video ads, you're gonna see them on social media. You're gonna see that in lcmentalllywell.com. And so that's just an opportunity for you to be able to go to our site. It will then take you from there. There's a couple of ways that will get to our current main website from there. There's also articles there, and just the way for us to engage our community and capture. One of the cool things about it too is that we're able to have them subscribe at that website, which allows us to capture email addresses. And one of the things that obviously we're working on now is being able to get the database and get information in to the system where we can all share that information and have it available when we're doing different campaigns. So we're really excited about that and what's going to be available to us and how it's going to help enhance our ability to touch our community. And so we're excited, and also we have billboards going that will nominate, give you the opportunity to nominate people for our recognition ceremony. Normally it's May 1st, but we weren't able to do that with Levy. It was in full-blown Levy mode, right? And so we weren't able to do our normal recognition ceremony. And so we're still going to acknowledge those people in our system and in our community who do very great work. And so we're gonna do that as part of our recognition month in September, when we have Recovery is Beautiful. And so part of that, we're going to be able to look at our 8 areas, don't ask me all 8 right now, where we recognize people for just the good things that they do. So we have billboards going up in some very strategic areas, some that are highly populated, highly traveled areas, and then some of those remote communities that we don't often touch that are in our county, right? Those smaller communities like a Jerusalem that would normally, we wouldn't put necessarily a billboard there. I don't always think about it, right? But this is a time for us to be able to be knowledgeable and intentional about making sure everyone in our community has a chance to see a billboard. These aren't the digital ones. These are going to double check. These are going to be the ones that are up all the time, right? We have that period that you arrive by and it'll say, know someone making a difference in our community? Nominate them. And they'll have the opportunity to go and nominate them for one of our categories. So I'm very excited about that and hoping that's going to drive us a new type of application for it. And then they'll be asked to do a digital recommendation, as we've done in the past, and then we'll have the digital ceremony. So it'll still be digital in September, but we'll also recognize them in our recognition ceremony as well. Did I cover it all?
Question, the nomination process, will they be going online to fill it out? So, will you be able to, like, make sure that the board, each one of us get like the link so that we can
Absolutely.
send it out to encourage? Because this is just a wonderful opportunity to really engage the community. I commend you for that idea, that's amazing.
Thank you. Absolutely. When it goes live, we'll make sure the billboards go up, I believe it's June 27th. So we'll make sure on that date that everyone gets the link for being able to get your current friends, family, whoever to nominate or to apply. Everything about it is going to be digital. Then once they are selected is when they'll do if you haven't seen it before, you do a video piece for why you nominated the person, and then we record them, Creo. Then it comes in and record the person who won as they're getting their award. It's really a great piece. It usually comes out to be about 27 minutes of a ceremony. So I'm looking forward, and I'm thinking this is just gonna give us a chance to touch more people, but at least the community will know that we're recognizing those in our community that do excellent work. So, thank you.
Will this be the process going forward?
Hopefully, let's
Okay,
see that
good.
it works.
Okay.
Sometimes you have a genius idea, and it's like, that was genius, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
So
To be
we'll get back.
determined.
The digital part, yes, because we've been doing that. This will be our 3rd time. 2020, yep, when the pandemic started, was our first one digital. We did this last one digital. So this will be our 3rd time digital. But as far as the billboards, this will be our first time doing it that way. And we will go back to increasing where we're putting it. So I didn't mention that. So Stalworth Magazine and a few other places are places that we're looking at in our community, new upcoming vibrant places to also place advertisements so that we're getting the word out into minority communities, but also into places where we normally wouldn't have thought
let's make sure people know we're doing this in our community.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent. Finally, we need to thank Miss Morgan Gabrielson. Today is her last day for a board meeting. She's accepted a new position and will be leaving us at the end of the month. So thank you for all your excellent work.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations, Morgan.
Thank you. You all right, Scott?
Good people. What's wrong with you?
We look at it as an opportunity.
So, do you have someone in mind for the new Morgan?
He's so funny. You can't leave this board high and dry. We need a Morgan.
I got a feeling it's gonna be me for a while.
Morgan, are you training someone now?
No, but I'm gonna leave good notes and good resources for everyone here.
Good deal.
Good.
Thank you, Morgan. And then last but not least, this is Andre Tiggs and Miss Howe's last board meeting before they term out at the end of the month. They cannot be reappointed, so thank you very much for your service over these last 8 years.
Thank you for your cakes too.
Please, cake. We have a plaque for you.
Oh, you got a picture? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Are you moving closer to the cake or out of the picture?
Out of the picture.
Both.
It's not bad.
Go right ahead.
That's what I'm saying.
There we go. You hold on, get in the middle, not on the other side, and there we go.
No, 1, 2, 3. Everybody's talking.
No. Thank you.
We're changing our cell phone numbers now, so maybe we'll hear from you.
Andre has sent word. He unfortunately couldn't be here this afternoon, so I would like to read for you something that he has sent to Scott for me to read. I want to thank all of the members of the Mhrsb. Each of you are amazing. Scott, I owe you a world of thanks for giving me an opportunity to serve on the board and constantly helping me during my family crisis. Sweet. Morgan, thank you for your constant guidance and assistance. Susan, your smile, laughter, and conversations have always brightened my afternoon. Just know I will forever and always advocate for those with mental health. Again, thank you all, Andre.
We'll make sure.
Okay, next up is open session. Richard.
Just briefly, I just came from the levy review committee. They started half an hour late and they went into a lengthy executive session, but they did approve the 5-year 3.7 renewal levy for the Toledo Library and the 5-year 0.17 for the Imagination Station. I believe that'll go to the county commissioners for their vote next week. After that, they've got to get it certified by the Board of Elections, and they have to have everything done by August the 1st, but it's on track. And today was the first day of the new security precautions over at One Government Center. This is something that they have been discussing for about 6 months now, and I have pestered everybody that I can find. Is there going to be any public input? There was not. I'm wondering what effect this is going to have on like Jeannie's coffee shop. She's the visually impaired woman that runs a coffee shop there. I'm wondering what effect it's going to have on First Wednesday, where approximately 80 or 90 people in the criminal justice system come into that building and they receive all kinds of services and information. For as long as I can remember, the security guards at the One Government Center have allowed people to come out off the street and use the restroom if they behave themselves. Most do, some do not. Some are homeless, some clearly have mental health issues, but I I don't know, I kinda doubt that's going to continue. I'll try and find out, but there was like no public input of any kind. I would assume this was approved by the Port Authority and they weren't terribly interested. But that is a high-traffic building, and I know the staff from this board go there on a regular basis, but yeah, they do not have you gotta get wanded and you gotta put everything in it's similar to this building. But yeah, that was started today, and it did not go well. So we'll see what happens with that.
Wow, thank you for your
So,
update.
to Richard's point, I actually was there at 9 o'clock this morning at Government Center, and it was a hot mess. I mean, because then when I told, so you come in, you get wanded, you know, then you have to go to the desk, they wanna know who you're there to see, they have to call to make sure, they look in the book and make sure, you know, and they call up there to see if you have an appointment, and then if you don't, then it's like, you know, or if you do, or what if they answer the phone, you're just like there. So to his point, when you have 80 people there, I mean, it's a mess. I mean, so yeah, so they're gonna have to look at something or get a whole lot of people because it's just there's only one door. I mean, the doors are all there, but there's like one way to go in. And you just have to go through all this.
So show up an hour early, if you have an appointment.
Yes.
Yeah, really, I mean, that's,
Yeah. Yeah, they had, well, no, you have, no, yeah, they wanna know who you're there, they want your license, they call, like, you see you're going to, like, if you have an appointment, they call up to make sure you have one.
that's, I'm just thinking about people who just, yeah, there are so many services that you go to one government center for, to your point, Richard, that you don't have an appointment. So
Right,
what does
I
that
don't know what
mean?
that looks like.
I pleaded for community input and nothing. Every committee I could think of, but this is what the Port Authority wants. I assume they have their reasons, but there was no public input of any kind. It started today.
We got the notice today that the security measures have changed at about 11 o'clock or so. Somewhere around there. At least that's when I read it. I got it beforehand, but that's when I read it today. And I just sent it out to the staff, about 3, I think.
Well, I do want you to know, Richard, that I said, Richard's not here. I missed you. You're always here. You're always over in the corner.
Yeah, that's right.
And so when I turned, somebody must have said something, I turned and I saw you and I said, oh, Richard came with me. But seriously, I thought, where's Richard?
Right?
The levy review committee went about an hour and a half longer than it should have.
Oh, well, we're glad you made it, and thank you for your update. Anything else for open session? No. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
It's right there. I got it for you.